Morning drama at the Edwards house. The morning sunlight streamed into the room as Juliana stirred awake. She stretched lazily and blinked a few times before noticing Alex sitting at the edge of the bed, staring in her direction. She frowned, her voice groggy. "Why are you staring at me?" Alex snapped out of his thoughts, looking away quickly. "I'm not staring at you." "Yes, you were," Juliana insisted, sitting up. Alex smirked. "Trust me, I wasn't." Rolling her eyes, Juliana threw off the blanket and got out of bed. "Whatever. I'm going to freshen up," she said, heading to the bathroom. When she returned, her hair still damp and her face glowing from the cold water, she glanced at Alex, who was scrolling through his phone. "Oh, I forgot to tell you something yesterday," she said casually, leaning against the doorframe. "What now?" Alex muttered without looking up. "You need to wash my underwear. I didn't bring enough, and it needs to be cleaned." The phone slipped from Alex's hand as he turned to her, incredulous. "What did you just say?" "You heard me," Juliana said, her tone calm but smug. "You want me to wash your underwear?" "Yes. And before you start complaining, remember the contract. You're supposed to do what I say unless it's illegal." Alex threw his hands up in disbelief. "This is madness." Juliana shrugged. "Call it what you want. Just get it done." Muttering under his breath, Alex grabbed a small towel and stormed into the bathroom. He gingerly picked up the offending garment as if it were radioactive, holding it at arm's length with the towel. Juliana followed him, leaning against the doorframe with an amused grin. "You look like you're handling toxic waste," she teased. "That's exactly what this feels like," Alex shot back, his face a mix of annoyance and determination. He dropped the underwear into a bucket, poured in some water, and gave it a vigorous shake. Satisfied, he used the towel again to fish it out and placed it on the side of the sink, careful not to touch it with his hands. Without a word, he stomped out of the bathroom, clearly fuming. Juliana peeked into the bucket, her grin widening. "That's not washing. You didn't even touch it." Alex turned back to her, his expression deadpan. "The contract didn't specify how I should do my duties. What matters is that it's done." Juliana burst out laughing. "You're really something, Alex. You always find a way to win." "I don't blame you," Alex said, his voice dripping with sarcasm. "Go ahead, have your fun. This is clearly the highlight of your day." Juliana, still chuckling, walked past him and into the bathroom. "Maybe it is," she said over her shoulder. Alex collapsed onto the chair in the room, running a hand through his hair. 3 months, he muttered to himself. 3 months, and I'm free." From the bathroom, Juliana's laughter echoed, only adding fuel to his frustration. It was a quiet afternoon at Juliana's house when she came storming down the staircase, her heels clicking sharply against the marble floor. Her face was twisted with anger as she spotted Mr. Joel, her driver, waiting for her in the sitting room. "Mr. Joel," she snapped, folding her arms. "Are you the one gossiping to my father about my life? That Alex and I don't go out? That we live like strangers?" Mr. Joel blinked, taken aback by her tone. "Ma'am, I didn't gossip. Your father asked me questions, and I simply answered truthfully." Juliana narrowed her eyes. "Why would you butt into my business? Do I pay you to report to my father? Mind your own life and stay out of mine." "Ma'am," Mr. Joel said calmly, "your father has been like family to me for years. I would never betray him." Before Juliana could respond, Alex appeared at the top of the stairs, hearing every word. He leaned against the railing, observing the tense exchange. "Enough," Juliana said, waving her hand dismissively. "You're excused." Mr. Joel nodded politely and left without another word. Juliana stormed into the kitchen moments later, where Alex was casually serving himself food. She pulled open the fridge, grabbing some fruits. Noticing her presence, Alex continued what he was doing without saying a word. Juliana turned to him. "So, are you going to ask why I was yelling at the driver?" Alex shrugged, barely looking at her. "Why should I? This is the first time we've seen each other in a week, even though we live in the same house. We're already living like strangers. Why should I bother with something that doesn't concern me?" Juliana raised an eyebrow but said nothing. And another thing, Alex continued. You let me sleep on the floor for 2 nights at your family's house. And also made me wash your underwear. Why should I care about your yelling now? Juliana smirked. You didn't sleep on the floor. I gave you a blanket and a pillow, didn't I? I even brought a heater to make the room warm. And the underwear, I didn't force you. Why do you nag over past things? Alex paused and turned to her, unimpressed. That's your justification. You made me sleep on the floor because you didn't want to wake up with someone's leg on top of you. For the underwear, I don't even want to talk about it. Juliana leaned against the counter, her expression unbothered. Exactly. I was being practical. Alex let out a dry laugh. And you wonder why I don't bother talking to you. Everything with you is about control. Juliana tilted her head, a playful smile tugging at her lips. So what? Do you want an apology? Alex shook his head. Forget it. Let's talk about something else. What did you and your father discuss during those tennis games? Juliana's smile faded slightly. He asked a lot about us. I think he's starting to suspect this relationship is fake. I'm not surprised, Alex said, crossing his arms. You're confronting your driver because of it, aren't you? You think he's the one feeding your father information? Juliana nodded. Yes. My father uses Mr. Joel the same way he uses Big Tony, as his eyes and ears. Joel's been with my father for years. Alex frowned, leaning against the counter. Can I ask something? What's really going on here? I noticed a lot during our visit to your family. You have tension with your father, obvious dislike for your stepmother, and a strange rivalry with your stepbrother. It's like you're all competing for something. Juliana stared at him for a long moment, her usual sharpness replaced by a rare vulnerability. You're very observant, she said softly. Try me, Alex replied. Juliana sighed, grabbing a stool. Fine, you deserve to know. Juliana's story. Juliana took a deep breath. My father loved my mother deeply, but my grandfather wanted him to marry his rich friend's daughter, Olivia. When my father refused, my grandfather didn't take it lightly. Instead of telling my mother what was happening, my father decided to get her pregnant, hoping to force my grandfather to accept her. Alex blinked. That's intense. Juliana's voice grew heavier. It backfired. My grandfather offered my mother money to terminate the pregnancy. That's when she found out the truth. She tried to confront my father, but he was forbidden to see her again. They even bribed our landlord to evict us and sent us far away, disguising it as a favor. My mother was left alone, pregnant, heartbroken, and abandoned. Alex's jaw tightened. When I was 2, my grandmother died, leaving just me and my mother. My mom battled cancer in secret, hiding it from me. She told me everything about my father, how they met, how he abandoned us just before she passed. She gave me his photo and some money, telling me to find him if anything happened to her. After she died, her best friend, who I call my aunt, took me to my father's house. That's how I ended up in his world. Juliana paused, her voice breaking slightly. Olivia hated me from the start. My father tried to make up for lost time, but he was too late. Big Tony raised me more than he did. My stepbrother, Nelson, and I got along as kids, but Olivia always pulled him away. Everything I had to fight for, every scrap of respect or recognition, I had to claw out of nothing. Alex let her words settle. And now? Now? Juliana laughed bitterly. Now my father wants proof that I'm in a serious relationship before he gives me anything from the company. That's where you come in. That dinner last week, it was my mother's death anniversary, but my stepmother doesn't know. My father masks it as a family gathering every year. That's why I disappeared after, because I spent 3 days at the house where my mom and I lived. I bought it years ago and filled it with her pictures. Alex stared at her, his expression softening. You've been through hell, Juliana. She nodded, her walls lowering slightly. I told you all this because I don't want mistakes. Not with my father. Not with this deal. Alex's reaction. Alex exhaled deeply, his voice calm but firm. You know, Juliana, your past explains a lot. But you've become mean, to yourself and everyone around you. You're trying to control men because of what your grandfather and father did to you and your mom. You want to prove to the world that you decide everything now. Her eyes narrowed. What are you trying to say? I'm saying it's obvious. The way you treat me, like trash. You made me sleep on the floor. You made me wash your underwear. You're punishing me because I'm a man. Juliana's voice sharpened. I didn't force you to do anything. You agreed to this. Alex shook his head. Did your father force your mother to love him? Did your stepmother force you to stay in that house? We all make choices, Juliana, but don't let what they did turn you into someone worse than them. He turned and walked out, leaving Juliana standing there, speechless. She leaned against the counter, Alex's words ringing in her ears. For the first time in a long time, she questioned herself and the path she was on. At Lucy's apartment, Lucy was lying on her couch, flipping through a magazine absent-mindedly when her phone buzzed. She glanced at the screen, her stomach knotting as she saw the caller ID, James. With a deep breath, she answered. Hello? Hi, Lucy, James said cautiously, his voice softer than she remembered. I just realized you left your purse in my car the other night. Lucy frowned. I didn't notice. I only used that purse for clubbing, so I haven't looked for it. Well, it's here, James replied. I can drop it off at your place later today, if that's okay. Lucy hesitated for a moment. Sure. Thanks. That evening, James arrived at Lucy's apartment. When she opened the door, he handed her the purse, lingering a little longer than necessary. Thanks, she said, holding the purse tightly. James smiled faintly. You're not going to invite me in? Lucy studied him, debating. After a moment, she stepped aside. Okay, come in. James followed her into the sitting room, his eyes scanning the familiar space. Lucy gestured toward the couch. Have a seat. Do you want something to drink? Water's fine, he said, sitting down. Lucy returned with 2 glasses, handing one to him before sitting on the opposite end of the couch. The tension in the room was palpable, but James broke it with a small laugh. Do you remember how you used to sneak out of your window to go clubbing with me? He asked. Lucy chuckled despite herself. Yeah, I thought I was so slick. My parents never caught on. James leaned back, smiling. And that one time we got locked out because your dad came home early and we had to spend the night in my car. Lucy laughed, shaking her head. You mean your dad's car? He was so mad when he found out. They continued reminiscing, sharing moments that once brought them so much joy. The tension slowly melted away, replaced by a bittersweet nostalgia. James shifted closer, reaching for Lucy's hands. She stiffened slightly but didn't pull away. Lucy, he began, his voice trembling. I need you to know. I didn't cheat on you with Rose. I never would. She lied to separate us because of the fallout you two had. Lucy frowned, her voice low. She claimed you slept together, James. What was I supposed to believe? James gripped her hands tighter. I swear to you, it never happened. She made up everything. Yes, I was vulnerable then. I won't lie about that. But it wasn't to the point of betrayal. Rose has admitted it to me, and she's been begging to talk to you. But she said you blocked her everywhere. Lucy's gaze dropped. Of course I blocked her. She destroyed our relationship and humiliated me. She was my friend, James, someone I trusted. And you? Her voice cracked. You didn't even pick up my calls to explain yourself. James looked pained. I know. I failed you, Lucy. But let me tell you the whole truth. He sighed, his voice heavy. That night, Rose called me to help her arrange her fridge with her boyfriend. I didn't think anything of it because I thought she was still your friend. After we finished, her boyfriend got an urgent call and left. She brought me a glass of juice. The next thing I knew, I felt dizzy and out of control. She told me later that she only pushed me onto the couch and staged those pictures. I couldn't stop her. I could barely move. Lucy's expression softened, but her voice remained sharp. Why didn't you tell me this? Why didn't you fight harder to prove yourself? James closed his eyes, exhaling deeply. Because everything went wrong that night. When I woke up enough to leave, I was arrested on the street. Someone had been robbed nearby, and they thought I was involved. The police found drugs in my system, and I had no idea how to explain it. I spent 2 days in the station, out of my mind, being questioned about things I didn't understand. Lucy's eyes widened, her grip on her glass tightening. When I finally got out, I tried to call you, James continued, his voice breaking. But by then, you had moved on, and I didn't blame you. I let you down when you needed me most. Lucy sat quietly for a long moment, her emotions swirling. Finally, she said, James, that time in my life was a nightmare. My mom's illness was getting worse and I was falling apart. I needed you, and instead of support, I got betrayal. Or at least, that's what it felt like. I know, James said softly. And I'm so sorry. Lucy wiped a tear from her cheek. Rose, I underestimated her. But I also shouldn't have let my boyfriend visit someone I was fighting with. That's on me, too. She paused, her voice firm. I can forgive her, but I can't let her back into my life. That bridge is gone. James nodded, understanding. And what about me? Can we rebuild our bridge? Lucy looked away, her mind racing. I don't know, James. Things have changed. I've changed. They sat in silence for a moment before James spoke again. Will you at least let me take you to lunch? No pressure, no expectations, just lunch. Lucy hesitated, but finally nodded. Okay, lunch. As James left, Lucy leaned against the door, her thoughts spinning. She pulled out her phone and stared at Alex's contact, her finger hovering over the call button. Alex, she whispered, conflicted. I hope you won't be mad. It's just lunch. Nothing more. A night out. Back at Juliana's apartment, Alex was lounging on the couch in the living room, scrolling through his phone, when Juliana emerged from her room. She was wearing a stunning, fitted club dress that shimmered under the lights. Her heels clicked confidently against the floor as she stood in front of him. Alex blinked, surprised. Are we expecting company? Juliana smirked. Number, get up and get dressed. We're going to the club. Alex raised an eyebrow. You're joking, right? I know I brought up some old memories earlier, but this doesn't seem like a good idea. Juliana rolled her eyes. If I use my command from the contract, you'll just get annoyed, so I'm asking nicely. Please, Alex, I need this tonight. Go get dressed. He sighed, shaking his head with a small smile. Fine, but this is on you. At the club. The club was alive with flashing lights, pounding music, and a crowd that pulsed with energy. Juliana led the way inside, her confidence drawing eyes as she moved through the crowd. Alex followed behind, feeling slightly out of place but determined to go along with it. It didn't take long for Juliana to start letting loose. After a few drinks, she was on the dance floor, her moves catching everyone's attention. She grabbed Alex by the hand and pulled him close, swaying and spinning with him in rhythm to the beat. You know, Alex, she said over the music, her words slightly slurred. You're actually a nice guy. I mean, really nice. Alex chuckled. Thanks, I guess. Are you okay? Juliana nodded enthusiastically, stumbling slightly but catching herself. I study people, you know, and in these past few weeks I can confidently give you a solid 60%. Alex laughed, steadying her. What happened to the other 40%? You nag too much, Juliana burst out laughing, leaning into him. For me to get 60% from you, that means I'm doing pretty well, Alex teased. Don't hype yourself, she said, wagging a finger at him. It's not that impressive. She turned toward the bar, signaling for another drink, but Alex caught her hand. I think you've had enough, Juliana. She pouted. Don't worry, Alex. My driver will take us home. Just enjoy the night. Drink with me. Don't leave me drinking alone. Alex sighed but relented. All right, but just one more drink and then we're calling it. Juliana grinned, grabbing his arm and dragging him to the bar. They clinked glasses, laughing as they downed their drinks. Back on the dance floor, Juliana became even more playful, swaying closer to Alex and occasionally tripping over her own feet. Careful, Alex said, catching her for the third time. I'm fine, she insisted, leaning against him for balance. Just, maybe we should stay a little longer. You're fun, Alex. You're actually fun. Alex smiled despite himself, holding her steady. I'll take that as another compliment. They danced and laughed, their energy blending with the chaotic excitement of the club. For the first time, Alex saw a side of Juliana he hadn't expected. Carefree, vulnerable, and surprisingly charming. As the night wore on, he couldn't help but think that maybe, just maybe, there was more to Juliana than the walls she kept so firmly in place.